Hey, what's going on, guys? So, a little while ago, I did a review on the EverDrive for the TurboGrafx, the Turbo Duo EverDrive. Crix, the guy who makes them, sent me one for free for review, and it was awesome. Well, I guess, we're starting to form a little bit of a friendship because he decided to send me the EverDrive Mini for the GBA. And I'm going to tell you right now, this thing does way more than I thought it could. I, just figured Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, which is, on the box, what it says. But it actually does more than that. I'm not going to say it does more than that with like 100,000% compatibility, but it does way more than that. So I want to go over this with you guys today. I'm going to play it on the Analog Pocket, and then I'm going to show you it playing on the Game Boy player. But I just want to show you what this thing can do, man, because I tell you what, I like the idea of a flash cart for the Game Boy Advance. It has a great library, but after seeing everything this thing can do, like, it's next level. It's essentially a must buy, but hey, don't take my word for it. Let's check it out. So just like the TurboGrafx one, it comes in a nice, cool case. It says Crix on it, 2009, EverDrive GBA, tells you what all it can support. No ROM patching required, fast loading, just pretty much all the stuff that's on the packaging. So when you open it up, really nice little holder here that holds the cartridge itself, and the little scan me guide that gets you the latest firmware. I will say that one thing you want to do is scan that, get the latest firmware, drop it on your micro SD card. I'll show you the file structure I have on here, but basically I made a little folder with folders in it to separate the ROMs. Out of the box, you can just drag Game Boy Advance games onto here and it'll work. Some things you need to do to play some other games is you need to have the emulators. So for Game Boy and Game Boy Color, you do need to go online and find the little emulators, and there's a folder in here where you just drag them in. It tells you how to name them. It's very specific. So like Game Boy has to be GB.GBA. The Game Boy Color has to be GBC.GBA. But then I want to go into what else this thing can do. So, if this thing, like I said, on the box, it just says, hey, NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and then Game Boy Advance. NES being really cool, but this thing can also do Sega Master System. It can do the Game Gear, and I'm gonna put an asterisk next to this one. It can do the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I'm gonna put an asterisk because it's so slow, it's nigh unplayable. I'll show that later on, but first let's just show some compatibility with handhelds, right? So, first, just because I have it right here, Game Boy Micro, cool little system if you have one, but turn it on. Obviously it's going. So just like the other EverDrives, it has a little menu. You probably can't read it too much here. We'll go over the menu more, on the, when I have it playing on like a TV, when I'm taking some capture footage. I'm going to use the Game Boy player. But look, it works. Mario Land 2, easy peasy. So, know it works on a micro. Let's take a regular Game Boy SP. This is just me flexing a little bit. This is the Char Gundam model. It was in Japan only. I just thought it was cool. And I wanted to show something with a backlit screen because a regular one might not be as easy to see. And of course, there we go. Sorry, the battery's a little low. But as you can see, it works just like before. Now the other thing that's really cool though, that I really like about this, is the fact that it has compatibility with the Analog Pocket. And I like this for a couple reasons. One, the Analog Pocket is super duper nice. If you don't have one of these, and you like playing handhelds, this is something you definitely want to look into because they're very nice. But the thing that's really cool about this, and same with the Game Boy player, is there is a dock for this. So you can take these games and put them on your TV and play with a controller. But as you can see, look, good to go. Everything works. Nightmare in Dreamland. I will say that when you pop this in, it does assume it's a Game Boy Advance game. So with the Analog Pocket, there's like a lot of settings and stuff that you can tweak depending on what console you're playing. So if you're playing a Game Boy game, via this. You can't change the Game Boy settings. You can only change the Game Boy Advance settings. So just something to keep in mind. But anyway, without further ado, let's check out some of the games, some of the compatibility. I'm going to be recording this on the Game Boy player, so it'll be easier for me to see, you know, and for y'all to see. But yeah, on the whole, just out the gate, this thing is pretty damn cool. So as you can see, I'm playing it on the Game Boy player on the GameCube. If you go to the main folder, the GBA system, you can see where you would put emulators and stuff. This would be basically what's on your flash cart. But if you see here, everything is named very specific. GB, GBC, GG, NES, Neo Geo Color, Neo Geo Pocket, SMS for Sega Master System. When you download your emulators, which are the GBA versions of these, just make sure that it says that. And then I like to make a little folder for ROMs, and you can see here all the different ROM folders. So let's go into what these games look like playing it on your TV, because it is pretty damn cool. So, as you can tell, regular Game Boy games, I mean, they run really good, and it by default has the filter for like the Game Boy, like the kind of green, yellowy scan lines kind of look. But it runs great. It runs really smooth. I was playing this. It's actually funny. I was playing this through, in fact, all these you'll be seeing, I'm playing them through the Game Boy player on the GameCube with a Wavebird, and I have it coming through like an HDMI out into my other room onto my capture card, where I'm playing it specifically on a flat screen TV. So this is like as convoluted as it gets, but as you can tell, it runs really smooth, sounds really good, looks really good. I mean, Game Boy games, like I said, if you look at the back of the box, it basically says NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance are, you know, the defaults. There are some others that I'm going to show you. We've already kind of discussed that, but I mean, on the whole, this plays really, really well. So I'm just going to show Game Boy Advance first, because everything's kind of in ABC order on my folder structure. But Game Boy Advance is the easiest. You don't have to download anything, no emulators, no nothing. You don't have to do anything except for just drag a Game Boy Advance ROM file onto anywhere, onto your SD card. You don't even need to make the convenient folders like I did. But I mean, it's, you know, this is why you get it, right? So, like, even if this did nothing else but play Game Boy Advance games, I would say it's pretty damn worth it, especially because I think this thing's like $100, depending on where you get it from, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, I'm not sure, but I know from the main website it's $100, and you know what, it just plays everything quite well. Game Boy Color games obviously work really, really good. I decided to go with the Mega Man Extreme game just because I didn't want to like show, you know, more, you know, Mario or anything. Although, you know, I could see playing the Zelda games being pretty good on this. But, you know, Game Boy Color was a weird time. It's kind of like a half step. But, you know, it plays just as smooth as you'd think. I mean, you know, I keep saying that, but it plays really well. Compatibility is like 98, 99%. I'll talk a little bit later why it's not like every single game is incompatible, and it'll make a lot of sense really when I talk about that, because it's more of a physical limitation than a emulation thing. But I mean, as you can see here, Game Boy Color games work really well. If you ever want to play the Mega Man Extreme games, they're pretty cool, and I would definitely check them out because I mean, you can play them very conveniently. So this is a Game Gear game. This is actually the Mega Man Game Gear game, and it's pretty cool, and just like the other stuff, runs buttery smooth. I mean, the only thing you have to deal with is the crappy Game Gear like sound font, but I mean, you know, take that out of it and you're gonna have a good time. There's some cool Game Gear games. I mean, Sonic Drift is one that really stands out to me. You know, even this game isn't really too bad, but there's a lot of Sonic games I like on the Game Gear. In fact, I had a whole video of where I bought like $100 worth of Game Gear games. Check that out if you want to see some weird ones. But I mean, it's cool to be able to play the Game Gear on your Game Boy Advance or on your Game Boy player. This is a system that I feel kind of fell by the wayside. If you have an Analog Pocket, you can buy that adapter, but then you have to buy the Game Gear games too. So this is kind of a really good middle ground. So, you can play NES games on this system, which is so freaking cool. You know, I decided to use Kirby's Adventure because we just saw the Return to Dreamland. So it's like, hey look, here's the old version of what we just saw. But it is so neat. I mean, like, the NES library is really, really good. I mean, you know, granted, just like any game library, there's some games that kind of blow, but I mean, you can throw in the original Final Fantasy, the Dragon Warriors, or Dragon Quest, whatever you want to call it, games. You know, all the classic Marios, 1 to 3, they all play really well. I mean, it's, you know, the NES is obviously a very easy system in comparison to, you know, the Game Boy Advance, but it's still, you know, just the fact that you can take these on the go, or, you know, like I'm doing right now, play them on your TV. If you don't have an NES, you know, this is a great alternative. If you have a Game Boy player and a Game Boy Advance, or the Analog Pocket and the dock, and, you know, you have access to this flash cart, then you are 100% good to go. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, because this is so weird, is, you know, obviously there's no way I could check all compatibility because there's like thousands of them, but this thing plays ROM hacks. This is some kind of ROM hack for King of the Fighters for NES, so this is technically a Nintendo game. I will say that after playing this, it's really crappy. I don't know if it's hard to say, right? Because the emulation on Kirby was really good, but the emulation on this game, I don't know if it's just the fact that it's a crappy ROM hack or the fact that it's like an emulation problem, but either way, it's not great. I just wanted to show this to show that, you know what, this thing can play ROM hacks, so, you know, at least some of them. This one works, kinda, I guess. But yeah, still, pretty cool, pretty neat. So, as far as very working, compatible games, I want to talk about the Sega Master System, because, I mean, these things do work. If you have a Master System converter... Actually, I did like a little video once where I had my Analog Pocket with a Game Gear adapter, with the Game Gear Master System converter, and then a Master System game, and that worked. I just did it just to see if you could do it. But you know what? This is obviously the way to do it. If you want to play Master System games, just download the emulator, download the games onto the EverDrive, and you can play it on any Game Boy Advance working console, if you have a consoleized Game Boy Advance or whatever. So, I mean, it's pretty neat. It's, you know, these games are, once again, like the Game Gear, stuff that just... You know, you don't get to play much. It wasn't too big in America anyway. Definitely bigger in other places. But it's just nice to be able to, like, check these games out if you never have. I mean, you know, there's all sorts of ways you can get the ROMs you need. So, you know, I won't tell you where, but I'm sure Google can. But it's just neat to be able to play these games on the go, play them on a Game Boy Advance, you know, something with a nice backlit screen. And I'm glad that it has more compatibility than just Game Boy, because I didn't expect that, and it's really, really awesome. But now I want to talk about the one thing that does not work very well, and that is the Neo Geo Pocket or Neo Geo Pocket Color. And, you know, I'm going to defend the EverDrive here, because in the README file it says, yeah, it works. But, I mean, it doesn't really, like, prominently display that on the website or on the box or anything. It's not like, hey, this is a selling point, buy it. It's like the README is like, well, it does work. But you're watching it now, it really does not. I mean, technically it does. I am playing a Neo Geo Pocket Color game, but I mean, look at the time, the clock up there, right? Each tick should be a second, and it's more like each tick is like 5 seconds, 6 seconds. I mean, it's unplayable, I'm not gonna lie. I just wanted to highlight this just because if you're curious, or if someone's like, oh yeah, you should get this, it plays Neo Geo Pocket Color games. I mean, it's not something they proudly display as a feature, and for good reason. It just doesn't work very well. But I do want to take time to say the other stuff that's not compatible while showing how uncompatible this is. You know, it has like a 99% like compatibility rate for Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advanced, and all that. And the reason it's not 100% is, like I said earlier, a physical and very logical reason, and that is there are certain games for the Game Boy Advance that have sensors or all sorts of stuff. So like think like Kirby's Tilt and Tumble has like accelerometers where you're supposed to rotate the Game Boy. The Boktai games, they both had solar panels in them where you're supposed to go outside and like absorb the sun to fight monsters. So those are the games that are not going to be compatible. So it's not anything crazy. It does stink because some of those games are pretty cool. I mean, I'm really thinking of the Boktai games, but like, you know, it's a sacrifice you have to make. I mean, the library for the Game Boy Advance is so awesome, so huge. It is worth just scoring this thing just for all the RPGs alone. I mean, hell, Golden Sun 1 and 2, The Breath of Fire like 1 and 2 like kind of remakes that I think are really slick on the Game Boy Advance. There's like a Lunar game, a Lufia game. I mean, just that is worth it. But you know, don't take my word for it. This thing is really dope. I love being able to play it on the Game Boy player. I think the ability to play all these on TV is amazing. But you know, hey, so what do you guys think? I mean, you know, when I saw this, I thought the fact that it could do just the Game Boys was good enough. But throwing in NES, throwing in Master System, throwing in Game Gear, I mean, that is amazing. The slightest, I guess, downside is it kind of says it can do Neo Geo Pocket Color, but it can't really. I mean, not like playably, but you know what? Like, that's not even, you know, a thing for me, right? Because this system, this cartridge, basically, you know, said, hey, it can kind of run it, you know, give it a shot. But I mean, it didn't have to. So, you know, if it could have a little better, bonus points. But if not, that's fine. I mean, everything else this thing does is amazing. But hey, let me know what you guys think down below. This is a product that I like 1000% think is a must own if you love playing your Game Boy Advance. If you have a Game Boy player on the GameCube, it's like a double must own. If you have an analog pocket with the docking station, it's a double must own. Just the fact that you can play these with a controller on a TV, to me, is awesome. But just taking on the go is awesome too. I mean, I highly recommend, if you're going to get something like this, you know, do yourself a favor and get an analog pocket. Get yourself a really nice modded Game Boy Advance with like a slick backlit screen. Cause man, this thing can just like, oof, it's good. But hey, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't, please do. That would be super cool. But as always, my friends, take it easy.